In this video, I'd like to talk about abortion. We're seeing this debate rage right now south of the border in the US, and it's shocking to see the open embrace and even the celebration of abortion by those on the left side of the political spectrum, from conception right up to the point of birth. And we're not talking about people on the extreme left of the political spectrum, we're talking about mainstream Democrats, even presidential hopefuls, that are embracing abortion right up to the point of birth, and in some cases, if a child survives the abortion procedure, they're advocating that it be allowed to die on the doctor's table. It's absolutely shocking. And we're seeing absolute outrage in response to the new pro-life bills that are being passed in states like Georgia and Alabama. And it's really shocking to think that in the year 2019, in a civilized society, one of the biggest debates happening in the mainstream is whether or not it's okay to kill babies. If you step back and look at it that way, it's mind-blowing that we're even having this discussion. The left insists that a woman must have the right to responsibility-free sex. I mean, at this point in time, if you do not know how to prevent pregnancy, you're obviously not a responsible person. You just want to have sex and not be responsible for the consequences. Because abortion is the ultimate cleanup in aisle 7. You get pregnant, you go to Planned Parenthood, you go to a clinic, and they sweep the evidence away. It's disgusting. Babies are just disposable so that you can have your pleasure. The other position the left takes is that pro-lifers, people that support the life of the unborn child, the claim is that we are all about savaging the rights of women. And I want to spend a little bit of time on that claim, that pro-lifers are simply trying to deny the rights of a woman, because it's absolute intellectual dishonesty on the part of the left. And it's straw man argumentation. No one on the pro-life side is making the positive case to take away a woman's rights. It has nothing to do with women's rights. The pro-life claim is that that unborn child is a human life, and you should not kill a human life. Women's rights don't even come into play. We say, stop killing babies, and they shout back, stop taking away women's rights. Now, if they were to honestly address the pro-life position, they need to meet it where it is. It's not at the level of women's rights. It's at the level of, this is a human life and it must be protected. And it's very difficult for them to be intellectually honest and truly address that pro-life argument, because they'd have to try to prove one of two possible arguments, and they're both virtually impossible to defend. The first argument would be, yes, it is a human life, but the rights of the mother are more important than that human's right to life. I can't imagine anyone's right outweighing the right to life of another. So that's a difficult argument to make. The other argument they could make, if they really wanted to address the pro-life argument, would be that that unborn child is not a human life. But then they need to bring forth evidence to show that it is not a human life. And with our scientific knowledge today about the development of the unborn child from conception all the way through to birth, it is impossible to argue that that is not a human life. But if they do want to truly engage with the pro-life position, then they need to meet us where the argument is. It's about saving human life. It's not about taking away women's rights. Now, I'm going to give some credit to the pro-choice side of this debate, because I believe they are bright enough to recognize the true argument of the pro-life side. They just know better than to try and counter that argument. They simply can't justify why it is okay to take the life of a baby. And on the other hand, they can't support the claim that the unborn child is not a human life, because it's crystal clear that it is a human life. It's an argument they will lose, and no one ever looks good trying to defend a position that it's okay to kill a baby. So they know they have to steer clear of that. They don't want to be accused of being wrong, and they don't want to have to defend their position. So instead they go on the offensive, and they make unfound allegations and accusations against the pro-lifers. So they set up a straw man that pro-lifers are really anti-women, and then they light that straw man on fire and dance around it screaming at it. Now, I don't mind having the debate with the other side, but they need to meet my actual argument where it is. And I'll even grant them the premise that abortion is a woman's right, just to get that off the table as a point of contention. Because even if it is a woman's right, and I don't believe it is, but even if it is, there's no human right that takes precedent over a human's right to life. So even if it is a woman's right, that doesn't mean you have the right to take the life of the baby. The life outweighs the right to an abortion. So in order to convince me that my position as a pro-lifer is wrong, the pro-abortion side needs to demonstrate that the unborn is not a human life and that it can be justly killed. But they can't do that because the science is overwhelming in support of the pro-life position, and so they scream about women's rights being trampled in order to deflect attention away from the actual debate. And I, for one, am extremely tired of the self-righteous preening that's being exhibited by the left while they openly campaign for infanticide under the guise of protecting women. I'm sick of it. And there's one position in particular that are held by some on the pro-abortion side that really annoys me. And it's held by people like Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden, who are members of the Roman Catholic Church, which is an organization that teaches that abortion is a moral sin, comparable to murder. And I've heard both Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden state this position, that I have a religious belief that abortion is wrong, but I have no right to force my religious convictions onto another. I was reading an article online, a blog post by the National Catholic Register. This was published in April 2019, and they were discussing Joe Biden's position on abortion. So here's a quote from the article. It says, in 2015, Biden told America Magazine that he accepted on faith that human life begins at conception, but that he was unwilling to oppose that view on others. I am prepared to accept that at the moment of conception, there's human life and being, he said at the time, but I am not prepared to say that to other God-fearing or non-God-fearing people that have a different view. Now, I'm not a Roman Catholic, and I don't believe that the Roman Catholic Church holds much in the way of truth. Most notably, they teach a false gospel that can never save. So I'm not defending or promoting the Catholic Church in what I will say next. But for all its faults, the Roman Catholic Church is correct in teaching that abortion is murder. Now, Roman Catholic theology has two categories of sin. They have what's called venial sins, which are minor infractions that may weaken the soul, but they don't kill the grace that's within it. And then there are mortal sins, which are major infractions, which would cause you to forfeit heaven and be destined for hell. And mortal sins can only be forgiven through confession to a priest and other sacraments, I guess, of the church. So I'm going to assume that if Joe Biden is Roman Catholic, then he believes what the church teaches. Therefore, he would have to believe that abortion is equal to murder and that that is a mortal sin. The most grievous sin or immoral act that can be inflicted against another human being is to take the life of that human being who was made in the image of God. That is a grave moral sin. And here's where I fail to make any sense of Joe Biden's position that although he believes that abortion is wrong and that human life begins at conception, he's not willing to impose that view on others. He's certainly willing to take his belief that murder is wrong and impose that belief on other people. And according to Roman Catholic teaching, abortion is a mortal sin, just like murder. So why does he not treat both of those the same? And it's because at this point, it is still politically expedient to universally condemn murder, but you can't do so with abortion. To be against abortion is a vote-losing proposition, so you need to abandon your convictions on the topic if you are elected as a Democrat, or if you're going to be elected as a Democrat. So on the one hand, the Catholic Church that Joe Biden belongs to teaches that murder is wrong, it's a mortal sin, and he's willing to accept that and enforce that on others in the society. The same church says that abortion is the equivalent of murder, and yet he says he accepts that himself, but he's not willing to enforce that on the rest of society. And while the inconsistency of that position is frustratingly obvious, I'm more perplexed by what it means to accept something as being wrong according to your faith, but not wrong in practice. There may be certain activities that would be frowned upon if exercised within the doors of your church, but that are perfectly acceptable anywhere else out in the world. So it may be wrong to sit down in church and drink a six-pack or make love to your wife, but you can do those things outside the church. So that's an example of something that would be deemed wrong while you're in church, but not wrong outside of church. But to hold that abortion is wrong according to the teachings of your faith, but not actually make application of that in real life makes no sense. I'm going to hazard a guess that abortions are not taking place inside places of worship. So what sense does it make to believe that abortion is wrong while you're in church, but the moment you step outside, it is no longer wrong? The only place it makes sense for you to be opposed to abortion is out where it's actually happening. Morality is intended to be lived out. Morality is not a spiritual concept. The words, "you shall not murder," are not spiritual in nature. They correspond to a physical act. You would never accept that murder is wrong based on your faith, and then not oppose that view in others. Now, there are certain faith-based rules that do not apply to those that aren't part of a particular faith. So, for example, a Jew or a Muslim would believe it is sinful to eat pork, but they don't take that belief outside of the religious system and enforce it on others. The idea that it's sinful to eat pork is not binding on me, a Christian, or on someone who's a non-religious person. But the sin of murder, for an example, transcends religious boundaries. It applies to all humans. It's not a religious tenet. And the exact same thing is true with abortion. Abortion is not a religious tenet. It is not a spiritual concept. It has a meaning, and that meaning corresponds to a physical act, the act of killing a baby. So if Joe Biden believes abortion is wrong according to his faith, but that he can't impose that belief on anyone else, then his belief is entirely without meaning. What does it mean to believe abortion is wrong, but then also believe that abortion should be permitted? Said a different way, how does Joe Biden or Nancy Pelosi or others that use this faulty logic live out the belief that abortion is wrong? Morality is intended to be lived out. Immoral acts, moral acts are just that. They are acts. They're physical actions. Joe Biden lives out his belief that murder is wrong by not murdering people and then by supporting laws that prohibit or punish that act when done by someone else. So what is the real-life application of believing that abortion is a sin? The only way that belief can have actual meaning is if it has an actual application. And that application is to be pro-life and to be against the murder of the unborn child, whenever and wherever that is happening, regardless of whether or not it's something your church teaches.